Imagine a product so powerful that it generates profit without creating anything tangible. A product so invisible most people don't realize they're buying it daily. That product is debt. Far from neutral, debt has been deliberately crafted into the most profitable product in human history. It has funded wars, toppled empires, enslaved nations, and quietly drained wealth. Yet most people don't know where it came from or why it dominates our financial system. Debt is the story of money and power itself. Debt, in its simplest form, is a promise. You borrow today and agree to pay tomorrow. This promise, however, holds the core of financial control: interest, which turns the future into profit. For millennia, societies grappled with this. Ancient Mesopotamians recorded debts on clay tablets, but also periodically wiped them clean in debt jubilees. Leaders understood that excessive citizen debt could lead to societal collapse. The Hebrew Bible similarly commanded debt forgiveness every 50 years, a recognition that debt could dangerously enslave entire populations if unchecked. In medieval Europe, the Catholic Church officially banned usury, the charging of excessive interest. But merchants and bankers found ways around this, disguising loans as trade contracts or creating complex credit instruments. By the Renaissance, powerful banking families like the Medici in Florence built empires not on land or armies, but on lending. They financed kings, popes, and merchants, gaining not just money, but crucial political leverage. Debt was quickly becoming an engine of power. The true transformation occurred in the 17th century with the rise of state debt. When the Dutch Republic fought for independence from Spain, it raised money by selling bonds to its own citizens. This was effectively selling the future to finance ongoing conflicts. Suddenly, war was no longer limited by a king's treasury of gold or silver. It could be financed indefinitely. The Dutch perfected this model, and England soon copied it. The creation of the Bank of England in 1694 formalized national debt as a permanent institution. Instead of sporadic borrowing, governments began to live on debt, rolling it over endlessly. The bankers who managed this debt became indispensable to the crown, and debt graduated from private contracts to the very foundation of state power. The profits from this system were enormous. Lending to governments became the safest bet in the financial world because governments could always raise taxes to pay their creditors. This created a self-perpetuating cycle. The more nations fought, the more they borrowed. The more they borrowed, the richer their creditors became. Wars expanded empires, opened new markets, and created even more opportunities for debt. By the 18th and 19th centuries, bond markets in global financial centers like London, Paris, and Amsterdam were the beating heart of global finance, funding armies, trade, and colonial expansion, all on borrowed money. This cycle wasn't just about nations. As industrial capitalism spread, ordinary people were drawn into the debt economy. Railroads, factories, and vast infrastructure projects were built on credit, financed through bonds and bank loans. Workers earned wages from these debt-funded companies and, in turn, borrowed to buy homes, tools, and eventually, consumer goods. Debt seeped into every layer of economic life. By the 20th century, debt wasn't just a tool for governments or tycoons. It became an everyday product sold to the masses. Mortgages, car loans, credit cards, and student debt constructed the entire architecture of modern life, normalizing borrowing as the default condition of existence. Herein lies the hidden genius or cruelty of debt. It doesn't just create profit once. Every interest payment is a repeated transfer of wealth from the debtor to the creditor, from the many to the few, month after month, year after year. Unlike a product you buy and use, debt is designed to be permanent, locking you into a cycle of payments that rarely truly ends. A house bought with a 30-year mortgage often costs 2 or 3 times its sticker price due to interest. A credit card bill, rolled over month to month, can grow faster than your ability to pay it. What begins as a promise can quickly become a trap. Debt has become the most successful business model in history. It requires no factory, no inventory, no raw materials. It generates wealth out of time itself. The modern financial system doesn't just manage debt, it manufactures it, expands it, and depends on its continued existence to survive. The Bretton Woods Agreements of 1944, hailed as a new era of international cooperation, institutionalized this global debt reality. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank were established to lend money to nations in crisis or for development. Yet, behind the lofty rhetoric was a simple mechanism: debt as discipline. Countries could borrow, but only on terms dictated by their creditors. The IMF, dominated by the United States and Europe, began attaching structural adjustment conditions to its loans, telling entire national economies what to cut, what to privatize, and how to reorder their budgets. Debt wasn't just profitable. It became a powerful lever of political control, compromising national sovereignty as policies were rewritten in Washington or Basel, not local capitals. The decades after World War II saw banks discover new ways to directly sell debt to households. The mortgage became the crown jewel of middle-class aspiration. Buy now, pay later became the mantra, fueling consumer demand with credit even as wages stagnated. This provided banks with a steady goldmine of compounding profits. Debt became the hidden engine of modern capitalism, infinitely scalable. You didn't need to dig a mine or build a factory. You only needed signatures, contracts, and the authority to create money out of promises. The danger, of course, was that the entire system became addicted to expansion. Banks wanted debts rolled over, refinanced, and extended, because the longer people stayed indebted, the more profitable they became. Governments, too, found borrowing easier than raising taxes, allowing politicians to promise benefits today and push the cost onto future generations. Central banks, with their power to create money, made it all possible by ensuring endless liquidity. Debt was no longer a temporary bridge. It was the permanent architecture of the financial system. By the 1970s and 1980s, the consequences of this addiction became undeniable. Developing countries in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, heavily encouraged by Western banks recycling petrodollars, borrowed extensively. When interest rates rose sharply in the early 1980s, these nations found themselves unable to service their loans. The debt crisis exploded in 1982 when Mexico announced it could not pay. The solution? More loans, under even harsher terms dictated by the IMF and World Bank. Debt became a trap. Borrow to survive, then borrow again to repay, losing more control with each cycle. Ordinary citizens faced austerity, inflation, and unemployment, while elites and creditors collected interest. In the developed world, the financial industry found new ways to package and sell debt itself. Mortgages, car loans, and corporate bonds were bundled into complex securities and traded globally. Wall Street shifted from producing goods to engineering these debt instruments in a process called financialization, making credit the most important raw material of the modern age. The profits were staggering, as banks could originate a loan, sell it to investors, and move on to the next, collecting fees at every step. Risk was supposedly spread around but was often just hidden, waiting for the next crisis. The 2008 financial collapse was the logical outcome when trillions in mortgage-backed securities, built on the false premise that homeowners would never default en masse, imploded. The global financial system trembled. Governments stepped in, not to punish the sellers of bad debt, but to rescue them, demonstrating who the system truly served. Ordinary families lost homes, jobs, and savings, while banks received bailouts. After the dust settled, debt didn't shrink. It grew. The crisis itself became the excuse for more central bank interventions and ultra-low interest rates. Debt, by now, was not just profitable, but indispensable. Every part of the global economy depended on it. Governments funding deficits, corporations financing stock buybacks, and households maintaining living standards. Without constant borrowing, the system would collapse. Global debt today exceeds $300 trillion, more than 3 times the world's annual economic output. Never in history has humanity owed so much to so few. The profound irony is that this mountain of obligations is celebrated as growth by politicians, even as they know much of it is simply borrowed from the future. Debt has become so normalized we hardly question it. A 20-year-old takes on tens of thousands in student loans, marketed as an investment in their future. A couple signs a 30-year mortgage, marketed as a dream come true. With central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, on the horizon, debt's evolution continues toward programmable, traceable, and controllable money. Loans could be approved or denied automatically, interest rates adjusted in real time, and penalties enforced instantly. To many, this sounds like efficiency. But history teaches that efficiency for the creditor means less freedom for the debtor. Debt is not a neutral tool for progress. It is a deliberately cultivated product that turns time itself into money. It transforms the hopes of individuals and the struggles of nations into streams of interest payments flowing upward, concentrating wealth. To truly understand debt is to understand that financial freedom cannot be simply handed to you by a system that thrives on keeping you indebted. Real wealth means minimizing your dependence on borrowing, questioning the promises of easy credit, and recognizing that behind every loan offer is a machine designed to profit from your future.